Okay, this is the first time that I've had both of these ladies on the show together. They were both in studio separately, but now they're part of a terrific talk show together on Vice TV's Cari and Jemele Won't Stick to Sports. 11:30 p.m. on Thursday nights. Jemele Hill and Cari Champion here on the show. How are you, ladies? Good to see you.
Good. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Yes, definitely.
I'd say this is the coolest SportsCenter anchor reunion I've been part of in quite some time.
I agree. I didn't even register right away. I got to tell you, working with Jemele has been a breath of fresh air. We often look at each other and say, "I can't believe they're paying us to do this," but it's good.
Nevertheless, there it is, the direct deposit to prove that it actually happens. But I feel very comfortable in saying, of the three of us, I had the shortest tenure on SportsCenter. So.
Now, come on now, but you were, both of you were on during the day, or you in the early evening, Jemele. I had many a moon where I would look at Stuart Scott and we would look at the watch and we go, really? Is it 3:15 in the morning? Like literally that's if I had to peg my out time on SportsCenter, like whenever we didn't punch a clock, obviously, but it would be somewhere around 3 in the morning. That's literally when I did my job. So.
You're better than us, because I would have been in bed by then. The noon shift for me was great. I know, Jemele, you like the 6 as well, but the noon was great.
Mm-hmm.
I had my whole day afterwards. It's interesting because, Rich, you were a part of just the legacy of what SportsCenter was. You built it. You, Stu, there were Dan, Keith, there were so many people there, just legends. And then when we came on, there was a new version. Definitely when Jay came on, it was a new version of SportsCenter. But it was a new version of SportsCenter, and I always felt like, the powers that be were trying to live the years that you all had created. You know what I mean? They were trying to recreate that without moving ahead.
Well, it's nice of you to say, Cari, but I'll be honest with you. When Stuart and I were doing it, and I think I've had conversations with both of you separately on this very subject, but when Stuart and I were doing SportsCenter together, we, and it's nice of you to say that we were helping create it, we didn't know if it was working at the time, to be honest with you. We were like, I think this is working. And I was sitting there, somewhat concerned about whether it was working. And Stuart didn't care. He honestly, like he was like, I think it's working and I know what I'm doing is going to work and I'm going to keep doing it. Like literally, that's the way it felt when we were doing SportsCenter together.
Well, it's funny, the more as you talk to more SportsCenter alums, and certainly I bet on some level the people who are currently doing SportsCenter would say this, is that we all have some version of the same story or time at SportsCenter of, going through that sometimes volatile and tumultuous phase where you're trying to do something different or put your own stamp on SportsCenter, and it's not necessarily appreciated by everybody, and how daily, you wind up in fights and, just kind of fighting, not necessarily for your survival, but fighting for your peace of mind, like on a daily basis. And I think I said this to Cari when we started doing the Vice show, or as we got deeper into it, right, is I think about the show that we do now on Vice, and I think about what I was doing at ESPN, and I honestly don't know how I did it every day. I was like, I can't believe I used to do this 5 days a week. This is crazy. Right. Human beings were not built for this. Right. Yeah, so SportsCenter itself is much different.
But you grew up
different.
Jay grew up paper, right? So for us TV kids who start off in the small markets and one-man bands, like that to me makes sense. Like that was, of course, that's just what you did. You didn't have a choice. And even starting on First Take, that was just 2 hours of TV and you just sit, you know what I mean? Every day. And so you felt like that's just what it was. I think what's interesting is that this new version of what it was, SportsCenter had a hard time dealing with how social media told the news before. They wanted to live with the highlights. I'm like, well, we already saw that. So you always have to be able to tell somebody something different outside of the highlight. What's the other new element to it? This is news, not olds. And so I think for me, when I came on, that was the real tough transition because everything is available now, streaming online. Like if you're not in the streaming online game, you're not in the game. You know what I mean? In terms of sports, you're just not, because they want it immediate and they want it quickly.
No doubt. I mean, literally, you and I, but Jemele Hill and Cari Champion here on the Rich Eisen Show, you and I are talking on a Zoom to be recorded, to be put on a streamer. You know, like that's literally what we're doing now, right? And it's interesting that you said what you said, Cari, because I remember when, when 9/11 hit and we were on SportsCenter, and the bottom line that CNN used, that scroll to put all of the, headlines on there, SportsCenter decided to use it. And so here I am on SportsCenter delivering a lead-in, setting up to the highlight, and the final score appeared on the bottom line right across my chest. And I'm like, well, that sucks. Like, what are we, what are we doing? And yeah, like it turned the news into old, to use your phrase right there. I was literally the only SportsCenter anchor who complained about it. And they're like, whatever. And then I'd be honest with you, I just didn't want to continue doing a SportsCenter where it was about the why, what happened, as opposed to the what happened. Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, like add a perspective as to what's going on. Because the way that would be set up would be, we had to have one analyst who took one point of view and another analyst who took the other point of view and bash them together. And it's just something I just didn't want to, I just wasn't into it that much anymore, to be honest with you. But I'll be honest, I would have stayed, like if things were set up in a certain way. But it changed. There's no question about it. It changed when we were there.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all
Jemele and I are quiet. You would have stayed. Okay.
No. I'll be honest. No, I'm being very honest with you here. There were certain parts of the toy chest I wanted to play, with the expanding world. It didn't work out, but things just, it's just a show I just didn't want to do much anymore. To be very honest.
Here's it's interesting, Rich, that you say that. And I respect you for saying that, because again, I know you don't think so, but it was created for people who wanted to just talk sports 24 hours a day. What's going on? Evaluate it, break it down, do it, find it every which way, every person we can interview, everything. However, what has happened, which is really truly how our show came about, is that there are parts of sports that you can no longer ignore if you're a journalist. You cannot, your spirit doesn't sit right. For me, there was a time, I guess, like from 2016 to 2018, where we were covering, everything, on and off the court, on and off the field, because they did coexist. It coexisted in how these athletes lived their lives and how people respected them or didn't respect them, namely Colin Kaepernick. And when we started to veer away from that, as so many people want you to do, as a journalist, just at the core of what we do, I felt like we weren't asking the really honest questions or telling the true story or all of the story. And that is when I got uncomfortable. That's when I felt like I was flipping burgers. That's where I was like, okay, I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not doing what I love. And a part of what I love is, yes, sports, but it's also a part to tell the whole story.
Well,
I think,
it's interesting. No, I don't mean to interrupt you right there. And that, I guess that's what, what's so intriguing about your current show. Who came up with the title where let's just hit the nail right on the head? Like, let's just title the show right on the head, that you won't stick to sports. Like, how did that one come about?
Well, it was funny because we went through a couple of titles, and in fact, the initial press release is a completely different title that has nothing to do with what you see.
Right.
And as we started to workshop some names, the intention was to have a stick to sports segment. That is what was supposed to be initially worked into the show. But the more, we batted it around, the more the powers that be, the decision makers, they did too. They really liked the title. And for us, it became a rallying cry, because both of us, while ESPN, and certainly since we've left there, went through a period where we were receiving a lot of criticism because we did not want to stick to sports. And like Cari said, people have to remember, we're career journalists, is that if there are other things that are colliding with sports, and to some degree, not to some, but people were being so intellectually lazy about the stick to sports thing. Like, neither one of us were ever on SportsCenter breaking down immigration law. We never did that. Like, we weren't breaking down healthcare reform. We were not, You know what I'm saying? Like, we weren't out there talking about tax codes. Like, no, it was never like that. We were talking about the messy intersections between sports, race, politics, culture, gender, which are apparent and all around us, right? That's part of the story of sports. And I just got really tired, and I know Cari did too. It was just mentally exhausting to argue with people about whether or not we should be discussing very relevant issues in sports, because there were some people who were uncomfortable. It's funny, when we have other messy intersections, mostly things that don't have to do with gender or race, people are fine with those, right? Like, if we, I know it's a different type of issue that has obviously touched a lot of people, but nobody tells anybody to stick to sports if we're talking about cancer or certain diseases, or like, nobody ever says it then, right? But
remember, Jay, I always say this, I hate to interrupt. If Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for cancer, he'd be an American hero. If he said, I'm kneeling for cancer, or would name another issue.
I mean, to be honest, the other part of that is, if Colin Kaepernick had hit a woman, he'd be playing in the NFL, or been accused of hitting a woman, he'd be in the NFL, because that is a corrective behavior that they feel like they can fix. They can get you to stop doing that, right? They can't get you to stop believing police brutality and racism and systemic oppression exists. That tube is out of the toothpaste. So I got tired of dealing with a intellectually dishonest element, both in the building at ESPN and outside of it, that said that we shouldn't touch what is so plain and obvious in everybody's face. And it's like, if you lose the ability to tell the truth as a journalist, then why are you a journalist? Then it doesn't really make any sense. So, from that standpoint, I think us choosing the title "Stick to Sports" was about giving a middle finger to the people who kept telling us that.
Jemele Hill. And I'm sorry, I'm resetting here for the radio audience that will be watching Cari Champion and Jemele Hill here on the Rich Eisen Show. Go ahead, Cari. I didn't mean to interrupt you again.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you either. I laugh at Jemele because this is it's so interesting, the world we live in. Both can be true. I can be a journalist and live to tell you highlights and tell you about, the game last week. And while I really was disappointed to see Pat Mahomes go out, because I really wanted to see more of a fight, I can do that. But then I can also tell you about something else that's happening in the world of sports. And that's that messy intersection. I don't remember when we weren't allowed to do both. I often think of the very first show I started on, which is First Take. They were allowed to do it. And I think for ESPN, as long as you have one show addressing it, it's on the menu. And then the other shows can address it. And I understand that too. I understand that philosophy, because at the end of the day, it's business, right? That's the bottom line. Like, ratings, business, make money.
Right.
And I'm okay with all of those things. For me, very much different than my colleague who will tweet every 5 seconds and let everybody have it. For me, I just wanted to make sure that I was committing a couple of acts of journalism a show. Right. I just wanted to commit a few acts of journalism, and I would have been fine with that. I think that the problem is that we try to hide. Now, though, you see, Rich, even if you watch, times have changed. They have political guests on there all the time. I turn around, somebody is talking politics, and I'm like, wait, well, hold on. That wasn't allowed when we were there.
I know that, but it's not just ESPN, obviously, here too. Like, there are many sports outlets now that have, one would say, if we're in a country where we're talking about right and left, that have the right conservative point of view, talking to I guess by the time this airs, afternoon, on the former president of the United States. So Trump's been on Barstool, Trump's been on Outkick, and so that's just, for me, a sign that stick to sports is dead. I mean, the number of sports athletes that came out and said for Biden or Trump, I lost track on both sides, and it's dead. It's totally dead. But there is a line here where people want to tune in to watch sports, and they're like, well, I don't want to get sports with politics. Well, guess what? Like, and the NBA is talking about stopping play. This is part of sports, that this is something that needs to be discussed. If this is on the minds of athletes, this is something that needs to be discussed. And as you said, Jemele, you didn't lead SportsCenter talking about it wasn't Policy Center, I mean, so it wasn't, maybe because they couldn't find a sponsor, but it wasn't Issue Center, You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do. The Budweiser hot seat sponsored by
that would be something, you know.
Politico.
I know. I mean, definitely the National Security Council is definitely a hot seat.
Right.
But anyway, long story short is that there is a way that I think that this can be discussed and not denigrated as ruining somebody's sports experience, because
we also have to be clear though, Rich, about when people say stick to sports, we also have to be honest about what they really mean. They don't want everybody to stick to sports. They only want some people, as in Black people, to stick to sports. I mean, generally speaking, is that, like with one of the complaints that we hear is that, it's when certain athletes say something and about certain issues. We're talking about very thorny, emotional issues in this country, racism, police brutality. These are not easy subjects. And so a lot of the times that would be the case, because I'm guessing, you mentioned, Barstool and Outkick doing the Trump interview. I didn't hear a whole lot of complaints about them sticking to sports because of who they are and who they were interviewing.
No, I understand. I get it a lot. I spoke over the summer, when Jacob Blake was murdered. I spoke out over the summer when George Floyd was murdered. I mean, I had a platform, and I felt it was necessary for me to use it, not only because I felt it and I believed it, but I want my children to, when they go on YouTube, when they're old enough, to see, if they ever wonder what did Dad have to say about this when the world was falling apart, that they can actually see that I did something and I spoke about it. But I'm
and that was about the who, though, Rich. That was about the who, because you were speaking up, as a white man on behalf of Black people. So you gonna catch these strays as well. Okay. So it's just how it is.
I think that overall, I agree with you, Jemele, in terms of, it probably is more about the issues of people speaking about the Black community. But I think people in general who don't want to hear about sports and don't want to hear about it, period. They don't care what Brett Favre thinks. They don't care who, I really truly believe all around there's an overall fatigue from people who just want to sit and listen and watch sports. The problem is that's not the world we live in. We're in a pandemic. If we can't talk about the messy issues and the repercussions and the domino effect of a pandemic and what has happened and what has left our country in the state that it's in, it touches everything. I feel like it's just really, it's so ridiculous to think that these athletes who are playing, risking their lives on the collegiate level, on the professional level, won't feel what is happening, won't feel that mental lockdown. I was talking to a player the other day for the Golden State Warriors. He told me he was depressed. He was like, playing in this pandemic is depressing. Now, do we talk about that? Is that stick to sports? Are we allowed to talk about how depressed some of these athletes are because of what they're dealing with, but yet they're out here entertaining us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
No, I'm absolutely. Mental health is something that's considerable and something we should talk about. Do we, before I let you ladies go, do you want to talk sports? I mean,
yes, let's talk some sports.
All right. Well, then this is the topic I kind of want to, toss two in one here, because the city of Houston, Harden essentially either spoke or ate his departure into existence. And now he's in a spectacular spot. And I'm wondering if Deshaun Watson, the front row seat of all this, is thinking the same exact thing in a sport where usually somebody who's got a 9-figure contract can't speak something like that into existence. And I'm wondering what you think of Harden's departure and what's going on with Watson and how you think that might play out. You want to take that first?
Is it just me, or does James Harden already look slimmer? I swear to God, it feels like he looks slimmer.
Honestly, like the JH13 system, whatever that is, like if he can lose 30 pounds in like 48 hours, or maybe it's maybe it's the spite. I don't know what that is, but you're right.
He looks slimmer. Maybe it's being in a Black uniform. I don't know what it is, but I swear he lost 10 pounds the moment he showed up as a Brooklyn Net. Look, we know in the NBA it's a players' league, and despite the monstrosity of a contract that James Harden had, at the end of the day, somebody who doesn't want to be there is not going to do your franchise any good. But with football, as you mentioned, Rich, the dynamics are different. The players don't really have a lot of leverage. But in this case, if you're Houston, what are your options? Deshaun Watson is in his mid-20s. He is a special talent. He is an MVP caliber quarterback, which those are difficult to find. All he asked you was to be consulted, right? He had, in his mind, he wanted Eric Bieniemy. That was the guy that he felt like could take this team to the levels that they have not reached. It is the height of insulting that they would not interview Eric Bieniemy, who, by the way, regardless if Deshaun Watson even said anything, they should have been interviewing anyway, right? And the disrespectful nature, I think, of what they did sometimes, and I'm not going to say any names, but I've been in those work situations before that once you get shown who they are, it's very hard to unremember.
What situation?
That.
What situation, Jay?
I'm just saying, I've been in those situations before.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes when they show you who they are, it's hard.
Rich put on his glasses. I don't have time for this nonsense, ladies.
No,
I'm here to talk sports with you.
It is hard to unremember.
I'm teasing you.
I'm a 51-year-old man, Cari. Come on.
So if you're Houston, either you hire Eric Bieniemy or you lose Deshaun Watson, and you have to ask yourself, what's it worth it to you? Is he the type of talent, and I think that he is, where it is worth it for you to make him happy, because you do not want to be looking for another one of those kind of quarterbacks all over again over something that was as simple as consideration.
I think, Jay, you're right on with that. But here's what's even more interesting. I think if we go another level, that organization has made some questionable decisions, and we've watched. Something else is going on there. So I don't think it was just this moment in which Deshaun said he's upset. I think it was a series of things that he watched unfold. And he thought, well, why no consideration? Do you guys really want to win? Is someone here to help me? Who really runs that team? Is it really his team? You would think it would be. I don't know. I don't think everything that we see on the outside is what it is, and that's normally the case. But I agree with you. He is, as his collegiate coach called him, he does have a Michael Jordan-esque quality about him that I believe needs to be protected and loved and nurtured. And I'm taking my talents to South Beach if you're not taking care of me. I'm not saying he's going to Miami, but throw back to LeBron. But I'm taking my talents elsewhere if I can't be respected. And he has the leverage. How many times in your career, Rich? How many times in your career, Jemele, do you have leverage? And when you do have leverage, it's a small window, and then you get the best that you want. As far as James Harden, I'm not for sure if I believe that will work out. The Laker fan in me is speaking, but also the journalist in me is telling you those personalities.
This is the Laker fan talking. This ain't the journalist.
Although, Rich, those personalities. Talk to me about those personalities. Do we see them all coexisting harmoniously?
Well, you're, and I guess to just finish up this conversation here, because I don't want to keep you. This has been a great conversation, but there's a third man in Kyrie, and I guess I should be like this when I have this conversation. 'Cause this is, this is how he showed up, and
right.
I'm kind of like, what gives? Like, in the same way that you're talking about how the Texans need to cherish something or someone so generationally talented, and also Deshaun, what beats in here, not just as a champion, but as a human, is just such a rare combination that you need to make sure that somebody like that stays on your team. I mean, what sort of situation? Kyrie's won with LeBron, and now, like, I don't know what it is going on with him, but he's with Harden and he's with Durant now, and this is an incredible situation, and it's all set up by the glory that the NBA exists in a pandemic. We're so lucky that we get to talk about it. I can't imagine playing it. Can you suss out what is going on between us? I don't know him. I've never met him. I just can't compute. Anybody?
I did an event with Kyrie this past, I think it was the summer. God, Mondays and Sundays feel the same. So let's just say the last 4 to 6 months. I think it was sooner than that. And it was an event where it was him and Common, and we were talking about supporting Black women more and all the social justice issues happening in the country.
Right.
Kyrie's extremely thoughtful. He's very smart, but he's also I think he's somebody, and I say this with no inside knowledge. Cari brought it up a minute ago about players who are struggling a little bit more playing under these circumstances than we think that they are. I think this is something that we're seeing with him because remember, he didn't want to go to the bubble. Right. He was ready to shut it down. He did not think the players should be playing. And I think that these issues that have happened in our country, I'm not saying this is 100% the case, sure, but I do think that on a deeper level, seeing everything that happened in this country in 2020, I would not be surprised if in having, some introspective conversations with himself, if he wondered about what he was really doing with his life and about what his purpose was. I think he strikes me as somebody looking for purpose. And I think he wondered, is basketball my purpose? He brought the family of George Floyd a home. He started a fund for WNBA players who decided to opt out and playing in the Wubble. He is doing so much on the social and political realm. I did wonder when he took that little time out, is he thinking is basketball really where I want to be right now? Again, I say this with no insider knowledge, right, but this is the impression that I got from him after we did that event together where he could not have been more lovely, but he's a thinker. He is a thinker.
Yeah, I was going to say he's very mercurial and he stays in his head a lot. And you always, what happens is we forget, we watch the maturation process, Rich. These kids come in, they didn't socialize the way that we probably think they should. They didn't have this experience. And then we're watching them grow into whomever they think they are. So here he is, I remember him just like when they won the chip, when he was with the Cavs and LeBron and they won a chip and, I see beer bottles and ladies and this, that, and the third. Now he's, taking sage and running it around, the garden. So I'm like, he's been all over, like he's growing. You're right on. And I think he's just trying to figure it out. I think he's very expressive and we're watching it happen. And he's very comfortable being expressive. A lot of people aren't that comfortable. You know what I mean? They wait till they retire to let you see who they are. And he's figuring that out. And he's like, y'all have to see this happen as I'm watching it happen as well.
Well, this has been awesome. Everyone needs to watch these ladies go at it on Vice on Thursday nights at 11:30 p.m. Eastern time with Cari and Jemele Won't Stick to Sports. Thanks for doing this. We should do this more often. I honestly
Rich, I'd love it.
Scratch the surface.
Yes.
You're tough to pin down. You are both very tough to pin down. You got a lot going on.
No, we would do it anytime for you. It was so much fun. We got to do it when we talk about stew because, we all got our favorite stew stories we like to share.
Definitely.
And I just, want to describe for the radio audience, I've got my library background. It's a very nice curtain you've got back there. Very nice situation, Cari. And with the Emmy Award, nice humble brag.
Yes.
I like it.
Not really humble. Just want you to know, back there in my background for a reason, because I want you to ask me about it.
No, and Cari Champion. Check them out on Vice TV on Thursday nights at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.